We will not be victimized anymore. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. In a move that shocked absolutely no one today, the illegal Trump administration violated the Epstein Files Transparency Act by failing to fully release the Epstein files as required by that law, which was signed into law 1 month ago. The law, quote, explicitly required, quote, that the files be made publicly available in a searchable and downloadable format, all classified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials in the possession of the Department of Justice. Instead, the Department of Justice, the illegal Department of Justice under this illegal administration, released roughly 3,900 files today, nearly all of which were PDFs. 118 of those files looked very much just like this, a bunch of blacked out pages. Actually, Fox News literally just reported that the DOJ used the same redaction standards for, quote, politically exposed individuals and government officials as it did for victims in this. That was not an allowable qualification or criteria for redactions in these files, according to that Transparency Act. So once again, shocking no one, this illegal administration seeking to cover for the crimes of the head of this illegal presidency, Donald J. Trump, has committed obstruction of justice. And already, as they should be, organizations that we have partnered with here at the Removal Coalition are calling for Donald Trump's impeachment for obstruction of justice. I want to read to you this statement from Free Speech for People. It says, today, the Department of Justice failed to release the full Jeffrey Epstein files as required by law. That failure is not an oversight. It is an obstruction of justice, and it requires an immediate response from Congress. Trump must be impeached and removed. This is not a political question. It is a constitutional one. The United States Congress passed legislation requiring the release of the full Epstein files. But in direct defiance of that law, Trump, through his Department of Justice, continues to conceal tens of thousands of documents that implicate powerful individuals, including himself, while denying justice to Epstein's victims and transparency to the American people. I'm going to get back to that. There is actually an article of impeachment that has already been drafted by Citizens Impeachment and endorsed by Free Speech for People based on the obstruction of justice impeachment brought against President Nixon, modeled after that one. There are clear violations of law here. This is beyond the pale. You know, I'm going to get into some of the things that have been uncovered in the files, and there are some very disturbing things. The very few references to Trump. Of course, today they're trying to literally make it all about Bill Clinton. This is how stupid they think we are. They think that they can deflect this entire matter onto Bill Clinton by releasing a document dump, a file dump that highlights a former president who is not in power. We are not going to be gaslit. As I said at the top, we are no longer going to be victimized. One of the kind of top line narratives I've been hearing as I've been watching this coverage today of the release of these files is just how traumatic and unjust it has been to the victims of Epstein to have waited all these years for justice. In some cases, 30 years, these women had to wait. And it's that old statement, justice delayed is justice denied. It could not be a more apt parallel to what we are dealing with as a country, as we are as a country and a world subjected to and attempted to be victimized by this illegal administration. Every daily failure to act to hold them accountable, and that means removing them from power, is a denial of justice to the American people, and this needs to stop. This needs to stop. This is a country that has been terrorized, absolutely terrorized in the past 10, 11 months by this illegal administration. We're talking today about women that have been victimized. I often talk about how Trump's predation, his predatory nature, his sexual deviance when it comes to women and young girls is a mirror for how he preys on this country, how he violates this country, how he violates the world. Let me just, before we get back to Epstein, refresh us as to where we are with the vast and gross illegality of this administration. We've talked a lot in the past couple of weeks about the extrajudicial killings. They are literally just outright murdering people on the seas in the name of combating terrorism. That number this week is up to over 100. They have murdered over 100 people on the Caribbean in the name of so-called anti-terrorism, when we literally have a domestic terrorist sitting in the Oval Office. This man this week put up plaques. I'm sure you've heard of this. It's absolutely appalling and disgusting. Put up plaques in the Rose Garden of former presidents with engravings underneath them that are literally his Truth Social posts or the equivalent of them. Absolute lies about his predecessor. Politically charged filth is now engraved in plaques under former presidents' names in the Rose Garden. This man then renamed, or attempted, again, illegally, because everything he does is illegal, to rename the Kennedy Center the Trump Kennedy Center, claiming that entire board, who, by the way, was entirely appointed, most of them by him, to try to strip that cultured institution of its history and remake it in the golden, filthy image, fake gold image of this lunatic, claimed that the board unanimously voted to rename it the Trump Kennedy Center. First of all, it's illegal. It's a violation of the law that says that Congress has to do a renaming of an institution like the Kennedy Center. Second of all, they actually muted one of the board members who objected to the renaming of the Kennedy Center. This is the level of filth, the level of outright demagogic idolatry that is coming out of this authoritarian regime that is trying to insult the American people by continuing these just disgusting, disgusting insults on our intelligence and dignity day after day. I mentioned the 100 people that were killed at sea. Another story that has been way, way, way undercovered is the just outright suffering that has been caused by the dismantling of U.S. aid. I spoke to someone this week, actually met him in person, who's doing a documentary on U.S. aid and all of the horrors caused by the Trump administration, by the dismantling of that agency. I highly encourage you to go to ProPublica and read some of their recent reporting. 400,000 children of 600,000 lives that have been lost due to the funding halt. It's estimated another 1.4 million will be killed by 2030 because of the withdrawal of U.S. aid. Donald Trump is also attempting to sanction judges from the ICC who are trying to prosecute Israel for their war crimes. This week, he also tried to pardon Tina Smith, the woman who was convicted of breaching software in Colorado. This is a state crime. Of course, the U.S. president, the federal executive, is not allowed to pardon state crimes, but he is trying to do that anyway, trying to get the woman who helped him in Colorado to breach election security get out of prison. He is breaking laws left and right, left and right. And what we have today is just another spit in the face. It really is a spit in the face of the American people by releasing this partial list of the Epstein files against the law that demanded the full release of them. Now, I've seen a good amount of outrage. I've seen the usual suspects like Ro Khanna, who has, of course, with Thomas Massie, was instrumental in bringing this Epstein Files Transparency Act to a vote and getting it signed into law. He says he vows to prosecute any obstruction. There's talk of bringing lawsuits to combat this illegality, this obstruction that they're witnessing. Chuck Schumer said the missed deadline, quote, just shows the Department of Justice, Donald Trump, and Pam Bondi are hell-bent on hiding the truth. Well, Chuck Schumer, at what point do you think this actually demands action? And I just want to go back to that comment that I made about the victims and how some of them have waited 30 years for justice, and justice delayed is justice denied. Lawsuits take years. Ro Khanna, at last I checked, is not in a position to prosecute members of the Trump administration. We have an illegal, corrupt Department of Justice that will not prosecute crimes that need to be prosecuted and is instead using it as a political weapon to go after Trump's enemies. So who exactly is going to prosecute these crimes? The answer to this is impeachment. The answer to it is impeachment. It is not doing an investigation. It is not waiting to see. It's not looking to see, more into these liars and con artists, how just exactly they got to the point that we're at now. We know these people's MO. We had to be subjected to a sick, deranged speech by this illegal president the other night. Lie after lie after lie after lie. The only true statement I heard out of his mouth was that the world or the country cannot believe what's going on. That's the only truth I heard out of that speech. It was one lie after another about so-called success and benefits that this presidency has been brought to this country over the past year, while in fact they have been terrorizing and making us suffer and breaking every law, shredding the Constitution, defying court orders, murdering people. We are literally living, let's clarify this, we are living under a murderous regime. A murderous regime. This is not something that we wait for one more year to see how much more suffering goes on. I was listening to one of the survivors on television just before I started the show talking about how many survivors' suffering could have been spared if action was taken sooner. That is exactly what we are dealing with right now. Every Democrat, every Republican too, because these people at the end of the day have to sleep with themselves and go to their graves and meet their maker knowing what they did or did not do right now. And you already see them dropping out like flies, like Elise Stefanik leaving, like Marjorie Taylor Greene leaving, because it is too much for these people. We can start to leverage the reality and the truth onto them, the pressure onto them to take action, to bring back sanity. This is Christmas, for God's sakes. This is the holidays. This is the season of light. It's time to stop standing for this, to stop being victimized, and to demand action. Let me just read. I'm going to go back to Free Speech for People's statement on obstruction and how that article could be drafted, the one that's already been drafted by citizens impeachment. Any Democratic lawmaker could pick this up right now, and they should be, and file an article of impeachment. But just before I do that, let me go to the few things that we saw in the Epstein files about Trump. There was this one drawer out of all of these 3,900 pages, this one picture of a drawer. Here's the zoomed out version. If you zoom in, there's a picture of Donald Trump with what appears to be women. There's behind that picture of him, that picture we've seen many times with him and Melania and Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And then there was this one exchange that has come out in these files from court documents, a complaint for damages against Epstein and a victim that went under the name Jane Doe, talking about one of these very abusive episodes with Jeffrey Epstein. It says, while these visits made Doe extremely uncomfortable, Epstein and Maxwell made her feel she could not refuse them. During this time, Epstein started to pay for voice lessons and Doe and insisted that Doe could not advance her career in any way without them. When Doe expressed hesitation about spending time with Epstein and Maxwell or acquiescing to their desires, Epstein and Maxwell would threaten Doe and scold her for being, quote, ungrateful. During one of Doe's encounters with Epstein, he took her to Mar-a-Lago, where he introduced her to its owner, Donald J. Trump. Introducing 14-year-old Doe to Donald J. Trump, Epstein elbowed Trump playfully, asking him, referring to Doe, "This is a good one, right?" Trump smiled and nodded in agreement. They both chuckled, and Doe felt uncomfortable, but at the time was too young to understand why. This is who we have running our country, someone who would laugh at the abuse, the unthinkable abuse of a young woman who is being manipulated by these sick men. That's who we have running our country. That's who we have, who the news media on any given day treats like a normal president for 1 second. That's who we have, who the Democrats say we have to wait till midterms for them to start exercising their constitutional duty to defend our Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic. This is not acceptable to wait anymore. It is not acceptable to wait 1 more second. We have to take back our dignity as an act of respect to the Epstein survivors, and as a matter of dignity for the entire citizenry of this country and for the world. We need to act now. I'm going to go back to the Free Speech for People statement today and their references to Citizens' Impeachment article for obstruction of justice, which you can find at their website, citizensimpeachment.com. They wrote, Free Speech for People, as detailed in Citizens Impeachment's article of impeachment endorsed by Free Speech for People, Trump has 1, abused the powers of his office to delay, impede, and obstruct the release of the Epstein files, misused the FBI and DOJ to identify, flag, and conceal references to himself, offered or facilitated favorable treatment for convicted accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell in exchange for statements beneficial to Trump, made false and misleading public statements to deceive the American people about his relationship with Epstein and the existence of incriminating evidence, attempted to manufacture the illusion of transparency while blocking the truth, conduct a federal judge described as aimed not at disclosure, but at diversion. Of course, which is what today and the Bill Clinton revelations are all about. Diversion. It's constantly about diversion. And now the House wants to depose Bill Clinton. I mean, listen, you're looking at somebody here who fully believes that Bill Clinton was probably as implicated as anybody else with Epstein. But Bill Clinton is not destroying democracy as we speak. Bill Clinton is not murdering people on the Caribbean or causing the death of 600,000 people in the past year because of the withdrawal of U.S. aid. Bill Clinton is not disappearing people to Alligator Auschwitz, where people are forced to stand in 2-foot-high cages and deprived use of facilities to relieve themselves and sent to literal torture camps. Bill Clinton is not depriving people of their health care and SNAP benefits. Bill Clinton is not putting tariffs on other countries that are making American goods unaffordable for a vast number of Americans. Bill Clinton is not putting up plaques in the White House that make childlike accusations against his predecessors. Bill Clinton is not renaming the Kennedy Center the Clinton Kennedy Center. Bill Clinton is not trying to withdraw aid from Ukraine, who is our ally, who we are beholden to protect for them giving up their nuclear program and are being taken over and invaded by a hostile, anti-American aggressor, Vladimir Putin. Bill Clinton is not trying to prosecute his political enemies using the Justice Department to exact political revenge. Bill Clinton is not trying to rig a midterm election and make plans to stay in office for a 3rd term in violation of the Constitution. Bill Clinton did not have a violent insurrection against our Capitol to try to stay in power. We will not be victimized. We will not be gaslit. We will not have our dignity stripped of us anymore. We will stand in the light, and we will demand action, and we will demand it now. If you've been watching this show over the past few weeks, you know that we have had an incredible movement and incredible progress in this push for impeachment. I got to tell you, the more that I live through this, the more that I step back and look at it from kind of a 30,000-foot view, the more that I am convinced that we absolutely hold the key and we absolutely have the answer, and that this is it. This is it. I mean, let's get real right now. Okay, these are the conversations I have with people. If we are not talking about impeachment, what are we talking about? What do we think gets us out of this? Do we think that it's an election? Because I would love it to be an election. I love democracy so much. I love what this country stands for. But do we really think that this man, who I believe, and I have spoken to real election security experts about, did not even win the election that he currently holds the office for in 2024, and is openly trying to rig a midterm and talking about taking a third term? Do we really think that an election is going to solve this? Do we think that even if an election does solve this and he is voted out of power, that he is going to peacefully leave office? Does anybody believe that? So if neither of those get us out of this situation, and by the way, both of those are long-term. I'm sorry, but 1 year from now is friggin' long-term when people are being murdered at the rate that this administration is murdering people. But even to think that we could wait and then not have an answer, then what is the answer? What is the constitutional remedy? There is one constitutional remedy that unquestionably gets us out of this. It is the one that Donald Trump fears more than anything. It is the one that he has had scrubbed from Smithsonian records in regards to his prior impeachments. It is Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. It is the impeachment clause. And if you don't want to see blood on the streets of America, and don't say for a second, and I am not saying for a second, that we are threatening that. Not for 1 second. I am saying we have the alternative to it. We are demanding the alternative. If you do not want that horrific eventuality, we must demand impeachment. And every lawmaker who is not utilizing this constitutional remedy is edging us towards that horrific alternative. That's it. That's it. We must use the impeachment clause. We must use it now. As I mentioned, this movement has been incredibly successful, has made incredible progress. You know, last week I had 3 shows all about it, about the new articles of impeachment filed by Representative Al Green for threatening the lives of members of Congress. Even with that kind of article of impeachment, 23 Democrats voted to table it. But the real headline out of it was that 187, if you count the present votes, 187 Democrats voted in favor of moving that article forward, against tabling it, up from only 78 in the summer. That is a 77% surge in support. That is a huge indication of the success of our movement, of the removal coalition, of the remove the regime protests, of the mandate that we, the people, have given our elected leaders, and the pressure that we have made them feel. This is what democracy looks like. Okay, you hear that stated at protests, and even sometimes when I hear it, I'm like, really? Because are we really doing something? But this really is what democracy looks like. People power pressuring the elected representatives who work for them and causing them to change their votes and take action. This is what democracy looks like. And if we have a way out of this that does not involve more death, more suffering, more victims like these, I will not call them victims, like these Epstein survivors who who were subjected to the gross delay of 30 years justice. If we have action now, we can avoid that. Only if. And we cannot wait. We cannot wait for a lawsuit to play its way through the courts. We cannot wait until Democrats get back in power. Is that what you're talking about, Rokana? For Democrats to get back in power and then use the Justice Department to prosecute the current? Really? How did that work out last time? Really? You need to use your constitutional levers right now. It is sickening. It is obscene that to this day, Representative Al Green is the only representative that has not only filed articles of impeachment, but forced a vote on those articles of impeachment. There have been others filed. Last week was impeachment palooza. We had filed articles against Pete Hegseth for murder. We had articles filed against RFK Jr. for his obscene caricature of health at DHS. But nobody else forced a vote on those articles of impeachment. We need to be demanding that articles are filed, and we need to be demanding that votes are forced. We must. And I will not be told that we don't have the votes. I will not be told that this is a politically untenable path to pursue. This is our country. This is our Constitution, and this is the remedy that we have, and damn well we will use it. You have every right to demand that it be used. And when we get to those 17 very obstinate members of the Senate that we have to move to convict them, then we will damn well work on them peacefully and relentlessly, as I always say. I will not be told that some 300 million Americans do not have the power to move 17 mere men and women in Congress, or right now, as it stands, maybe 5 in the House that it would take to vote impeachment out of the House if we got all of the Democrats on board. This is not hard. They are trying to dupe us into thinking it's hard. They are trying to dupe us into forfeiting our agency, just like Epstein and Trump tried to dupe these young women into not knowing their own power, into putting them in these positions where they thought they had no escape, and in many times physically didn't have an escape. We do have an escape, and we're demanding that it be used now. I just want to tell you before we're going to have a shorter show today, but I want to give you some thoughts on Christmas. I also want to give you some thoughts on my perspective to all of this. If you don't know me, if you're just meeting me today for the first time, the reason that I'm sitting before you is because Donald Trump tried to silence me. He tried to silence me, 8 years ago on Christmas Eve. This man sent me an arbitration demand for $1.5 million. His campaign sent me an arbitration demand for $1.5 million, claiming that I had violated their illegal non-disclosure agreement because I filed a human rights lawsuit. I filed a human rights lawsuit to take back my dignity. Wasn't even political at the time. I would have my political awakening later, but initially it was just about dignity. It was just about a woman's worth and deciding that I was going to have value and integrity and dignity in this world, and that I couldn't have it unless I took action. And the response of this criminal junta to that act of dignity of one woman was to try to destroy her and make her disappear with a $1.5 million arbitration demand. Now, before I tell you the rest of the story and how it ended, I just want you to think about all the women that have probably come into contact with Donald Trump, that are probably really in the Epstein files, that are names that you may never, ever, ever hear, ever. Because Donald Trump used the same tactics that he attempted against me 8 years ago to make them disappear. Now, what I did when Trump came after me was have an initial reaction of fear and despair, but it didn't last long. It almost immediately translated into resolve, into what would become a 7 to 8 year battle in the courts of invalidating not only that one illegal NDA that he came after me with, but every single NDA that was signed by a Trump staffer in 2016. I went through near bankruptcy to do this. I went through years of practical homelessness. I started this off with no lawyer and no money, just the support of my Father, Mother, God, and my actual mother on earth, but nobody else. No army, no media support, no recognition. I was no E. Jean Carroll. I wasn't Summer Zervos. No, the media never picked up on my story, as incredible as it was. I never had that recognition or support from the public. I fought this in silence. Think about what I did and how unusual and how nearly impossible without faith, okay, what I did was. And when you think about the other women whose names you will never hear because they have been threatened, intimidated, silenced, paid off, God forbid something much worse happened to them to make them go off the radar. This is Donald Trump's tactic that he has been using his whole life. Threaten and intimidate anyone who tries to bring him to justice. My case was an outlier, a complete outlier. There are not people like me who just say, I'm going to put my whole, there are a few, but not many, who say, I'm just going to put my whole life aside, or can reach that point of spiritual clarity. And it was not easy. That enabled me to take this action from the get-go. Think about the other women who did not reach the same journey and direction that I did, or felt that they did not have even the spiritual resources, even though they're always available to all of us. It is unthinkable the amount of pressure that I had to overcome to do this. Just think about that. So on a day like today, when we are being gaslit and we are seeing yet another blatant, flagrant violation of law, let's start taking back our dignity. Let's have that dignity for ourselves. Let's have it for those survivors. Let's have it for our country and for the world, and not any longer be willing to tolerate delay or injustice or the destruction of our democracy before our very face. We're coming up here on Christmas, and I know this time of year is a time to look back and reflect on what has been done over the past year. And I've talked to a few people who have said this feels like a particularly heavy time because of how horrific a scene we are witnessing from this administration is. But I would just submit that what we have done is absolutely extraordinary. What we, the people, what this movement has done, what you have done with me, my friends, with the Removal Coalition, just over the past few months, but really starting in January, when I had just left Midas Touch after the election. I had just fallen into this world of activism, from legal activism to on-the-street activism, having never dreamed that I would find myself in this position. And those few dozen people that stood with me in January, God bless you. Thank you for trying to stop these horrors before they started. and then leading into this movement of tens of thousands of people that we had with us just a month ago in DC. What a beautiful thing we have done. How beautiful that the more that this administration has tried to break us and break the law and break our country, the more we have stood up, the more we have risen against it, the more resolved we have become, the more we have been in possession of our own power and agency and been determined to claim it. What a beautiful thing to look back on over this past year. So I would submit to you, in the spirit of Christmas and the spirit of the true Christ, and I share this as an actual Christian, one who would not be here without an understanding of the Christ and the power of that sword of the Spirit in my life, that Christ Jesus came to this world as a threat to everything that we are witnessing today. He was a threat to power and greed and money. He was a threat to those who thought that they could abuse their neighbor to enrich and elevate themselves. He was a threat to everything that Donald Trump stands for, everything. And he was also a threat to everything that his sycophants and enablers stand for. He was a threat to hypocrisy, to those who preached but did not live what being a child of God is. That's why they hung him on a cross, because he was that much of a threat to their way of life. And that's what Christmas is about. Christmas is about the birth of that Christ idea on earth, that complete shock to the system of materiality with the purity and cleansing rays of true Christianity. I submit that to any Republican. I give an awful hard time to Democrats on this show because they're telling us they're one thing, and yet not often with their actions bearing out what those platitudes are. But to Republicans who go out there beating the drumbeat of the Bible, wearing the cross on their neck, putting the symbolism all over the place, saying Merry Christmas and God bless America. Are you going to go through this season of light upholding this anti-Christ that we are living through in 2025, going into 2026? Are you going to let democracy, which is really a divine idea at the end of the day? Democracy is completely divinely inspired. It's about agency. It's about the dominion that it says in the first chapter of Genesis, we were all given dominion over the earth, which is, by the way, not power to oppress. True dominion is love. Are you going to let that divine idea of democracy die on your watch because you violate the first commandment by bowing down to this golden calf? You violate every commandment. Jesus' 2 commandments, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Are you going to have some dignity yourself? All right, everybody. I just want to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. I want you to be aware of how powerful and inspiring you have been to me and to this country by standing up and showing your love, your real love for this country over this past year. And I want you to reflect on that. And then I want you to take that and just be, man, I want you to just soar in the new year with that power that you have, and knowing that we are so on the right track with this movement. I am more convinced than ever. And believe me, I started this, look, when I was done with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, because the actual point for a remedy with it ended on January 6th of this year. Not that it's not fully in effect right now. It's fully in effect till this day. We're dealing with an illegal president that should be escorted off White House grounds. But to actually get to a remedy, I knew we had to embrace impeachment, and I did it from day one. And I knew that it was unpopular. And the people that joined me, like John Bonifaz from Free Speech for People, this wonderful constitutional scholar, knew it was unpopular, but it didn't matter. It was and remains the remedy. And we have pushed it relentlessly, and look at the progress we are making. Whether or not we are successful in this is only a question of our will and our resolve. So thank you for being in this fight. Thank you for bringing us to where we are right now. And don't let up for 1 second in the new year. We have to take this to a whole nother level. And I will be with you to do that. I can't wait. Thank you all, as always, so much for your support of me on this show. Thank you for subscribing to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel, even in spite of the very overt oppression of this platform to try to keep this message from spreading more. Thank you for being relentless and supporting me. Thank you for buying merch like this hat and this mug and this tumbler and the things that I create for this show, which are really the bread and butter at thejessicadenson.com. A lot of you have ordered them over the past week, I presume as gifts. Thank you so much for that support. The sponsor for the show is basically me. I'm the sponsor. So thanks for supporting our sponsors. And thank you for supporting my continued legal battle to this day at thejessicadenson.com/donate, which is where I am appealing a case that was thrown out, my underlying case, to actually have the Trump campaign pay damages, actually pay for their illegal prosecution of me over those years. That case was thrown out at the beginning of this year when this presidency illegally took power again, very politically. And I'm appealing that, and your donations are enabling me to do that. So thank you for that support from the bottom of my heart at thejessicadenson.com. Please, everybody, have a beautiful holiday. Have a Merry, Merry Christmas. I think we might be able to squeeze in one more very special show that you're going to want to see before Christmas. And then, of course, I will see you right after. My friends, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And as always, let your light shine.